Hello, this is Jack Vanderpaul, Team Lead for the SCAP Compliance Checker. And in this video, I'll be doing an introduction to the remote SSH scanning features for Unix. This video assumes you're familiar with the installation and basic usage of the SCC application. This is the 7th in a series of videos to help our users get up to speed with SCC. The remote Unix SSH feature is available on Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. With this demonstration, we'll be using both Windows 10 and Ubuntu 18.04. We'll start with Ubuntu and ending with a combination of SSH and WMI scanning from Windows. So right now, I have SCC 5.4 up and running on an Ubuntu 18 system. And by default, it's going to be having a local scan, and if you'll notice, it's only the content for Ubuntu bundled with it. So we're going to go and select Unix SSH remote scan. And then this message here is going to say to tell you how to go find the remote scanning plugin. The remote scanning plugin is basically a small version of all of the command line versions of SCC on Unix, along with all of their associated content. You need to make sure that you have the exact matching version. You can't mismatch, you can't cross match 5.3.1 with 5.4 and vice versa. So I'm going to go browse to where I know it happens to be. And this is going to take quite a bit of time. There's a lot of things going on here. It's doing some verification and extracting of files, and then it's going to have to install all that content. Okay, so now we are up and running, and we'll talk about the remote scanning options first. So we can look just at very basic options related to remote scanning. At the bottom here, you can determine how many threads you want to have scanning, just like with WMI on Windows. So we could increase the number of threads if we wanted. I don't have more than 30 systems that we're going to be scanning at a time, so there's no reason to increase the number of threads. But if you have a very large number of systems and your scanning host that you're logged into has a lot of memory, you can bump up the threads a little bit. It'll increase the performance a little bit. It's not a big deal. You can also determine where you want the application to be placed temporarily. It's going to copy a temporary runtime version of CSCC to those target systems, and right now the default is in the /op directory. It's going to make a subdirectory in there called SCC-TAC remote. That's really about it. If you want to uninstall the plugin, if you're not going to use this, you can uninstall it. And then we'll talk one more thing about output options. So since we're going to be using the credential manager, the SCC security configuration directory option is pretty crucial to that. The default is your user home directory. We strongly advise that you leave it there. If for some reason you need to put it in your application directory or some other custom directory, you want to make sure the permissions on those are locked down as much as possible. But for the most part, leave it in your home directory. We'll click Save. And I am going to enable all content right now. Say Select All. And we talked about this with the remote Windows scanning, but what SCC does is it's going to do some content applicability checks. So you can kind of enable all of the content and just fire it away. It'll take a little bit of time just to determine if the content is applicable to the target host, but you don't need to set up different scan sessions for every operating system and just have the content that you want. You could do that. And with the credential manager, we'll talk about profiles so you could have different groups of systems. Okay, so let's get started here. And I have already created a master password for my credential manager because I have some credentials already on here just because I didn't want to make mistakes. So there's a little bit of cheating involved here. For new users, you'll have to create a new password at this point. And the password is going to need to be state compliant, and it will expire, all of those fun things. So I have some hosts already in here as well. We'll demonstrate, actually, you know what, I'm going to delete these hosts just because, why not? This will demonstrate this as well. So I'm going to do a delete all. So all of the hosts are deleted. The credentials, I actually have a few that are already defined. We're going to leave those just for ease. We're going to add a new credential to start off with. And this credential, just so that I don't have any potential of making mistakes, I'm going to demonstrate error handling capabilities. So I'm going to make a fake user. This would obviously be whatever your actual user would be, and you're going to want to make sure you have an account that you can SSH to remotely and then figure out how to escalate privileges. And once we associate this with a host, we'll determine how we're actually going to do that escalation. So if this was an account that we needed a sudo to the root account, we would put the root password right here. If we wanted to do the open SSH RSA key, we'll do that here, and or password, or passphrase, I should say, for the RSA key. For this testing, we're going to stick mainly with usernames and passwords. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate adding a new host. I'm going to add 10. Okay. These are all systems in our isolated test network. And then I am, for the most part, the local system name is going to be queried during SSH testing. The description, you can be whatever you want here. I don't remember what the system is. It'll get queried, and I'll figure out what the operating system is and what the host name is. The operating system auto detect, leave it at auto detect unless something goes really wrong. I am going to do sudo. So the authentication type here is crucial. So we have a bunch of options here. We have SSH as root. So obviously you're going to be putting in just the root user. You can SSH as a non-root, then SU to root. This is useful especially on systems that don't have sudo, like Solaris. You can install sudo on Solaris, but by default it doesn't have it. You can SSH as a non-root account, and then sudo without a password. That all depends on the configuration of your account. And then you can SSH as a non-root, and then sudo with a password. So I'm going to do sudo without a password, and then I'm going to choose the account that I know happens to have sudo rights that do not require a password. And I can do a test, save, and close here. Oh, and this is warning me. The host key has not been saved for this one. Do we want to trust it for future use? And there's the SHA-256 checksum. And we're going to say yes. Okay, and what it's doing is it went out, it SSH to it, it sudoed without a password, and then checked to make sure that we had the correct free space and partitions. So it pretty much did everything with the exception of pushing out the application so that we know that this one is going to be scannable. We're trying to make the host credential manager be your spot to troubleshoot credential problems. So I'm going to import from a host file next. And with this one, I'm going to, we're going to do a SSH as a non-root account, and then SU to root. And I'm doing this because we're going to have some Solaris systems on here. And I can then select a host file, which I also have stored somewhere here. Apologies, there we go. Okay, so we found 6 hosts. The testing didn't happen at that point, so right now they're not enabled. So I can go through, and right now they're all associated to the same user. I could go through and tweak these and set different user accounts too. But I'm going to go and select. You can do a shift click and then right click, and you can say enable all hosts, and that's only going to enable them if the SSH passes. Some of these are a little bit slower than others. And after these are done, I will demonstrate showing what happens with them when errors occur. These were a bunch of systems which I know are good. So now I'll add one more host. I'm going to add that. And then I'm going to take sudo with password. And I'm going to correct that. Take that fake user. So I'm pretty sure it's not there. So I'm going to do that. It's testing SSH connections, and it even pop up an error log here. Okay, failed to authenticate using username password, username fake user authentication failed. So pretty much the password or the user didn't exist, or the password wasn't correct. So now I'm going to switch that over to sudo with password, which is what and then I will make sure that one works. Okay, and then I can enable that. So now we've added some credential. We've added a host by hand. We've added a host via host file. We've demonstrated the right-clicking. There's a lot of stuff here. Let's go through this. So we can go back and edit any of these hosts. So you could choose a different credential. I can cancel that. We can also go back and we can disable all hosts or disable selected hosts. You can test all the SSH connections. You could delete a SHA 256 fingerprint. For credentials, there's not as much you can do via right-click. It's really just a matter of editing, deleting, and deleting all. And you can see here we have 6 hosts associated to this one account, and 1 host associated to this, and 1 host to this one. Okay, so now we have some hosts enabled. We've tested with their credentials, so we're pretty confident things might work. We can also go through in this load profile up here. So if I want to disable a couple of these, I could save this as a profile, call it test. So then I could switch between, I had a different profile for rel. That's interesting. We're going to delete this section and start over. Okay, with that, we're going to close this window. We're going to return back and actually perform a scan. So we have content enabled. We have hosts enabled. And we're just going to click Start Scan. This is going to do a little bit of integrity checking to make sure that the applications that are going to get pushed out are what we expect. And then each one of these lines is a separate thread on your local host. And what it's doing right now is it's copying a compressed version of the application out onto those target systems. And then it's going to expand those out and start it, and then watch the process table and also give a little bit of feedback as to what is actually happening. This scan, depending on each operating system, can take a while. These are just, it takes just as long as a local scan would, with a little bit of essentially installation and extraction. So the first minute or so is additional prep work. But once the actual scan starts, it's just like it would take a local scan if you were sitting at the terminal of each one of these systems. So we can see some of the systems are scanning now. And one of the systems we can see already finished because it was a CentOS 6 system and there was no applicable content. So the content that is bundled with SCC is from DISA, and each one of the content streams is very specific to a certain operating system and architecture. And CentOS is very similar to Red Hat Enterprise Linux, but not exactly when it comes to doing applicability checks. In a previous video we discussed, there's a scanning option for running all content. So if you have other systems such as CentOS or other Debian variants or other Red Hat variants that are not like the vendor manufacturer one that matches the content, you could do a custom scan and set that option and say run all content. That might be an issue, an instance where you'd want to group those certain systems together and just run a specific piece of content, because otherwise you'll end up running Solaris content on CentOS as well, which is not going to be desirable. So you want to just enable the content that is as close to possible of that system. So some of these, and you can see there's tests running of Red Hat and Ubuntu, and we're doing file scans, and it's gathering packages. So there's all of these things are going on, and each one of these things is going to take a few minutes. And in the video, we will probably scan forward till this is completed. And then we'll go from there. I'm going to let this scan, and then we'll be right back. Okay, and we're back. And we have one system that's taking a while to run. So we're going to take the opportunity here to talk about canceling scans and what to do and what not to do. So SCC has the ability to, you could select a single system here. I'll do so. And I can click Cancel Checked. So what it's going to do with that is it's going to instruct the remote application to terminate very soon. And then it will gather up the results and clean up the installation. If we were to just close the application, the SCC remote application on your target system would continue to run, and then the results would be left on that target system until the next time SCC ran by you or somebody else, and then it would be cleaned up. So there's definitely not a desirable thing to orphan scans. So if you have to terminate a scan, make sure you do it via the cancel method. You can do cancel all, or you can do cancel check. We're going to do cancel checked. We'll get a prompt. And then in a second here, so now the remote system has received a termination request. That's just the SCC application, obviously not the system. And now it's pulling down whatever results it had to this point. And then it is going to clean up that remote host, and it's canceled. So our scan has completed. One thing to note, on canceled sessions, you will not get information in the session viewer of SCC. So that system, that REL 7.1 system, we will not expect to see any results. There actually might be a couple reports on the local system, but it won't be integrated into the database. So if you want to have it fully feature-rich, make sure you let it run to completion. Okay, I'm going to close this. Okay, and now we can click View Results. And here's the current scan session we just did. See where you have results from a variety of systems. Only the content that was applicable. So here is we'll take a look at a Solaris x86 system. And there you go. That is how it works. We've talked about this with Windows a little bit. So if we wanted to filter, so if I just wanted to find results that were from Firefox content, I could type Firefox at the top there, and then I would only see results from Firefox, or I could type Solaris, and I'd only see the Solaris results. And that filters across each one of these sessions. So I could go see different, these are some scans I did before this one. Okay, that's it. That's the session viewer for SCC. And that concludes the remote Unix scanning from Ubuntu. Okay, now we're back on Windows 10, and we're going to demonstrate the Unix SSH and Windows WMI combination scanning, and we'll also demonstrate the profiles capability inside the host credential manager. So I will select Unix SSH and Windows WMI, and I already have a host file created, and we demonstrated this in the Windows scanning portion, but we can go look at which hosts. I've got a collection of test systems enabled here. And for Unix, we'll go through and I'll log in. And in the upper left up here, you can search if you wanted to as well, but I'm going to demonstrate the filters and the filters profiles. So I could choose these are ones I already created. So those are all the Red Hat systems. So if I sort by OS, I could see that I've just selected all the Red Hat ones. Or I could select the Solaris ones, or whatever type of combination of systems. I'll go back to my all hosts profile. So there's that, and you can save as a new profile. I can call it test. There we go. Pretty basic, but also kind of handy. We'll close that. And then we will do a scan. I've got all the content enabled: Linux, Mac, Solaris, Windows. And as we've talked about before, Windows does applicability checks so that not all the content will run. So only on Solaris 10 will the Solaris 10 content run, etc. I'm just going to click Start Scan. It's going to take a little bit. They're doing a little bit of integrity checking before we push out these temporary runtime versions of SCC. We want to make sure that they are what we think they are. And right now I have 30 threads set up. I could have gone through and gone into the options, and then the Windows WMI and SSH scanning options. I could have increased the thread count there. And as this is a large number of systems, 93, I could have increased that a bit. It will take a fair amount of memory. So if you had 100 threads, expect a couple gigs of memory usage, and also a lot of CPU. And it's just pushing files across and connecting and doing all these things in parallel. And we won't let this entire scan complete, but I can show you that you can sort, and we can see which systems we're scanning. We got a whole bunch of combinations of SSH and WMI of different various operating systems. And as soon as the first 30 get started, then it'll move on and get all of them running, and then it'll go back and monitor each one. So right now I've got some Windows hosts that are starting. That's about it. This is going to take a while because I had all the content enabled, so this is going to scan literally everything in our network, and it's going to pull it all back to this host and make a session out of it, and we can look at all those results, which we've done in other SSH and WMI sessions. So we don't want to take up too much time. With that, we will call it completed. Thank you very much.